It's the first Monday in January, and your inbox is full of emails about fresh starts, goal setting challenges, and ambitious plans for the year ahead. And as you scroll through them, you're probably feeling one of two things. One, either a quiet pressure to get on the new year, new me bandwagon to finally reset your career, land that role that you so much deserve, rebuild your confidence, or you're feeling just flat out exhausted. Because if you're being honest, you've probably tried the goal setting thing, maybe more than once. You've updated your resume, you've updated your LinkedIn profile, you've started reaching out to your network to reconnect and re energize those connections, and you've set timelines. You're saying, hey, by the time I collect my bonus, I'll be transitioning to a new role. So you plan to land that new job by the end of the first quarter. Or you decide, hey, I'm going to be more visible this year. So you do the work. You download the templates, you watch the webinars, you create a very solid project plan. But yet, something still doesn't feel right. Things still aren't quite moving as you expected. So here's the question I want to ask you on this first Monday of the year when everyone is talking about bigger, more ambitious goals. What if the problem isn't that you haven't set goals that are ambitious enough? What if the problem is something else entirely? That's what we're talking about today. So, welcome to Exit to Excel. My name is Latanya. They call me LT. And this is the space for mid career professionals who are ambitious, who are capable, and unfortunately, who are overlooked, especially if you have experienced a layoff, you're feeling looked over in your job, or you're feeling stagnant, or you have reached a moment where you realize that you aren't at the place in your career where you wanted to be, or that things just aren't working anymore. So, if you aren't yet subscribing, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button, and please share this with someone who is probably in the same boat as you. And you can also follow me on my social media on Instagram, Exit to Excel, on TikTok, Exit to Excel, and feel free to connect with me on my LinkedIn at Latanya Shaw. So let's get with today's discussion. Let me continue to describe a situation that probably feels familiar. You're in transition and, maybe you were laid off, or maybe you're just quietly dissatisfied and desperately want to make a move. Maybe you've reached the point in your career where you think, look, this isn't the career that I envisioned for myself at this point in my life. So you get to work. You're action oriented. And so you're not going to wait around. You update your resume, you update your LinkedIn, you start reaching out to people so that you can start being more visible, and you set goals. You set a goal to land that job by the end of Q1. Okay. So you reconnect your network and you refresh your personal brand. You're busy. You've created this project plan and you're checking off all the boxes and you feel like you're making progress. You feel like you're moving. But unfortunately, the results aren't following. The results aren't happening as you expected. Applications that you take so much time to complete, they disappear in the silence. They lead to nothing. And recruiters, you reach out, they don't follow up, they don't respond. Your conversations, your networking conversations, they are rather superficial. And your interviews, if assuming that you get them, they don't convert into real opportunities. Now, when this happens, your brain does what high achieving brains always do. It assumes that you have not done enough yet. So, what do? You apply to more roles. You tweak your LinkedIn profile once again. You start reaching out to more and more people. I see it all the time. You post more. But let me be clear about something. The issue is not your effort. You are capable and you are resourceful and you are genuinely putting in the work to make things happen. But the issue is that effort and strategy are not the same thing. Effort and strategy don't live in the same house. After being in HR for over 2 decades and working with people exactly like you, I've seen this pattern time and time again. When someone is busy and not moving forward, it's rarely because they're not trying hard enough or doing enough stuff, but it is often because they are putting the effort into the wrong things in the wrong order and without the infrastructure that would make those efforts actually translate into real opportunities, into efforts that would actually land them somewhere. Now, look, your resume is probably updated, but it's still describing who you were and not the position and not positioning you for what is next. Your LinkedIn is probably active, but it's still a reflection of your job history and not a reflection of your point of view. And you're probably networking. You're probably reaching out to people and you're probably having conversations, but you're still showing up as someone who is hoping for help and not someone who is clear on the value that they bring. And this is why all of this is so exhausting. You're doing the activities of a job search, but you're doing them from a position of reaction and not strategy. Now, look, most job advice treats the job search as a series of disparate and or disconnected tasks. Update this, optimize that, reach out more. And this is helpful in isolation, but it is disconnected from a larger strategy about who you are becoming and, more importantly, how hiring actually works today. It also assumes that if you do enough of these right activities, eventually the stars will align and someone will notice you and give you that interview that will land you the job. And at the level you're operating, unfortunately, that is not how it works. The roles that you want and the leaders that are hiring for those roles, they're not looking for volume, they're not looking for effort. They respond to clarity. They notice people who are visible for something and not just active everywhere. You've heard the saying, people or, trying to be everything to everyone. That is often what I see with people's job search, and it isn't effective. This is what I often call the invisible middle. It is the phase where you are doing the work. You're capable, you're showing up, but you're not positioned in a way that is going to create real momentum. And that distinction between hoping someone notices you and being strategically visible, that is often the difference between a search that will stall and one that converts. So let's reframe this, not just for the new year, but for the way forward. The belief that we are challenging is simple, and it is that goals plus effort automatically create opportunity. Let me say that again. The belief we are challenging is that goals plus effort automatically create opportunity. For mid career professionals in transition, that is rarely true. What actually creates momentum is positioning. Positioning isn't about doing more, but it is clarity that tells your efforts where to go. I'm going to say that part again too, so you don't miss it. Positioning is about clarity that tells your effort where to go. It is being clear on who you are, what problems you solve, who you solve them for, and why that matters now. It's about having a very cohesive narrative about your experience, your value, and your direction that you are able to articulate with confidence. Because when you have positioning, everything changes. Your resume becomes an argument for the future and not a record of your past. Your LinkedIn becomes a signal and not a summary. And your networking conversations stop feeling awkward because people quickly understand what makes you relevant and where you fit. I tell my clients all the time with their materials, if you have too many things on there trying to be too many things to too many people, then it takes too much effort to try to figure out where you fit. And so that is why positioning is important. When you have positioning, people remember you. And so when opportunities arise, they think of you because you move from being one of many to one who is very specific about what they do and the value that they bring. Now, this isn't about being very slick or salesy. Real positioning comes from clarity and from having done the thinking that most people avoid when they are in survival mode. Because here's what I know: most people, 90% of the people, they have the raw material. They just haven't positioned them in a way that gives them clarity. They haven't articulated it. And because of that, you stay busy just trying to stay afloat as opposed to taking the time to step back to get strategic. Now, positioning doesn't change or require you to change who you are, but it is about being clear on who you've become and to let that clarity show up consistently. Now, when you are able to do that, the effort you're already making, it finally compounds. It becomes aligned, it's directed, it's strategic. And that is when you start to see the momentum happen and when the momentum starts to return. Now, mind you, this doesn't happen overnight and it doesn't happen magically. But one thing it is sustainable. It's almost like weight loss. We talk about weight loss all the time and the magic bullet and wanting overnight results when we know it is just being consistent and being consistent and having sustainable results is where the rubber meets the road and where it makes the difference. And it's the same thing with the job search. Now, as far as positioning goes, more importantly, positioning shifts how you experience the transition. So you move from being, having the lack of confidence and feeling exposed and being reactive to being very grounded and confident and intentional. You go from waiting and hoping to be chosen to being very deliberate about who you are and where you belong. And this shift alone changes everything. When I've worked with clients on this journey of positioning and clarity, you immediately see the difference in their confidence and how they show up for their networking conversations and their interviews, and even in negotiating offers. It can make all the difference. Now, look, this message isn't for everyone. I know that. This is for the person who has already tried the piecemeal approach. They've done the updates, they have the project plans, they follow the advice, but they can tell that things still aren't clicking or moving in the direction that they need to be moving in. And this message is also not for someone who is just starting out, and is not for someone who is comfortable with slow trial and error progress. Now, if you are capable and you're experienced and you are aware that effort alone isn't producing the return that you expected, then this conversation matters. Because here is what happens if nothing changes. You eventually land something, but maybe you accept it under pressure. Maybe it is below the pay you wanted, it is below the level you wanted, but unfortunately, you run out of runway and the runway forces your hand. Or you land something that looks like a win, but it feels more like a recovery versus a reinvention. And because you got there without strategy, this pattern repeats itself the next time there's a disruption. Now, look at this versus this becoming the moment that you actually build positioning that carries you forward, not just through this transition, but for the ones to come, because unfortunately, there may be others to come. Now, this requires more than information. It requires more than a solid project plan. It requires clarity, structure, and accountability. Someone who understands how the hiring works and can help you connect the dots between who you are and how you want to show up in the market. That's the difference between staying busy and actually moving forward. So, on this first Monday, instead of asking yourself, what bigger goal should I set? Try a different question. What do I need to get clear on about who I am and what I offer? What would it look like to be strategic and not just busy? Now, these are not questions most people answer well by collecting more advice or trying to solve this alone. The professionals who move through transitions with confidence and traction, they aren't doing it through volume and through doing more. They're doing it by being strategic. They have guidance, they have structure, they have someone in their corner who can see what's distinctive about them and translate that into a real strategy that works. And that is what this platform is about. You don't have to do it alone. Here at Exit to Excel, we're going to help you move from scattered effort to strategic clarity, move from invisible to visible, move from being reactive to being intentional. So, over the next few weeks, we're going to break this down and really look at what positioning looks like and why it is the piece that most people miss and why it is the piece that makes all of the difference. But for now, I'm going to leave you with this. I want you to celebrate your effort because effort is real. I want you to celebrate your capability because capability is real. The missing piece is not your work ethic, it's positioning. And positioning is something that you can learn, positioning is something that you can build strategically and with clarity and with the right support. And that's the work ahead of you this year. And it's the kind of work that is going to change not just for this transition, but for every transition that comes after it. So I thank you for being here. And I thank you for taking your career so seriously. I'll see you on the next episode.